If you know me well enough, I will take you on a different spin and do some plastic surgery. So we both end up younger than the way we started, you know.
I'll take whatever you can do, Charles.
Okay, so are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to MindFlow Ergonomics. This is a channel where conversations concern matters of the heart are important for you and for me. You know, we live in a world that is fragmented, disrupted, and it's so important to realize that the battle of the 21st century is a battle of the mind. How we think, how we react, the decisions we make, the choices we make, can we make sense of them? And most important of all, how do we live a better version of ourselves? How do we enjoy this abundance of joy in this life? I designed this system called ROSE, which is a response optimization system using ergonomics, so that whatever we go through, no matter what state of mind we are in, we can respond in the right way. Now, my guest today is Dr. Gary Klein, a world-renowned authority on decision making. Now, Dr. Gary is the founder of Shadow Box. He developed the recognition prime decision making model and has been instrumental in founding the field of naturalistic decision making. Dr. Klein's written a number of books, such as Sources of Power, How People Make Decisions, The Power of Intuition, Searching for the Keys to Adaptive Decision Making, Remarkable Ways We Gain Insights, Seeing What Others Don't, and most recently, Snapshots of the Mind, a collection of short essays. So we are in the midst and the arms of listening to a man who, for the last 30 years, has been teaching us how to make the right decisions that is going to matter a lot to the way we live and human performance in this life. So, would you join me to welcome Dr. Gary Klein to MindFlow Ergonomics? Welcome to MindFlow Ergonomics, Gary.
Charles, it's a delight to see you again, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I was telling my girls, I mean, what's the time on you now? It's about 10 o'clock your time.
Yes, it is 10 in the morning.
And it's 11 o'clock my time, and I'm close to midnight. And I can tell you one thing, that this is like waiting for a baby to be born, man. But let me say off the bat, I want to congratulate you for your work, Gary.
Thank
You know, really, when I go through, I mean, it's just by God's send that you came into my life, because over the last 2-3 years, I was sitting and writing and so many things. Because, you know, as doctors, we have a very fixed mindset. It's like a peacock, you know, TikTok. We just go to work, come back, go to work, come back, and we don't know what the heck is happening outside. And so I mean, talking to you itself is revolutionary for me. And so I've been sitting here from 10 o'clock in the morning waiting to see this man at 11 o'clock at night, you know. And so listen, you listen, Gary. Let's hit the road. You
Okay.
have spent the last 30 over years giving your life for people to make better decisions in life. I mean, that's been your take, that's been your calling. And as I said earlier on, I want to congratulate you on that. You know, and I want to start off our conversation on a very philosophical note. I wonder if you saw the movie Alfie
Yes, a long time ago.
a long time ago, and we go back long ways.
Yeah.
And the lyrics of the song is, "What's it all about, Alfie? Is it just for the moment we live?" And so I want to ask you, when you look back, what's life? What is this phenomenon that we call life to you?
Oh, that's a dangerous question to
I
ask.
know, that's why I'm shooting it off first.
Back and forth, and I'll reflect on the way my career turned out. And
Absolutely.
it didn't turn out the way I had ever expected or planned. This was all accidental. Uh, and a lot of it was simply driven by curiosity. That's why I went into psychology. I was interested in how people think,
Right.
and my curiosity moved in towards how do people make tough decisions? How do people develop expertise? And so I just was investigating that, and one thing led to another. And I was very lucky in 1984, 85 to do a project for the Army. The Army wanted to know how do people make life and death decisions under extreme time pressure and uncertainty.
Yes.
They knew, and according to the standard models of decision making, people are supposed to um, generate a bunch of options and evaluate them on different dimensions. Under time pressure, you can't do that. So, what are people doing? And I decided instead of studying laboratory tasks in college sophomores, I said, let's study people who do it for real. And
Yeah.
we studied firefighters. And
Sure.
that's when we found out how people are actually able to use their experience
Right.
to make kinds of decisions, and everything followed from there. So that project was probably the major turning point of my whole career. And it
Right.
was a 6 month project. It was a small dollar amount, and we had to investigate them. And we did a few dozen interviews about tough cases. And then we had to develop interviewing methods, cognitive interviewing methods. So, in addition to coming up with a model of how people, describing how people do it, we came up with methods for getting inside their head and finding out what kinds of tacit knowledge they were drawing on. So, that project really changed my whole career, and everything followed from that.
Well, this is amazing because, even till today, and we will talk about that later. When we talk about shadow box training and the things that are, all coming out again and again from a man called Gary Klein. I mean, this is the fascinating world of the mind. I believe, Gary, that the 21st century, the battle of the 21st century, is a battle of the mind. And the mind was created as an open ecosystem, and it was never a mindset. It was meant to flow. And with the fall of man, we are now all trapped into these boxes, and everybody is trying to use neuroscience to find out what the heck is this thing called mind. You see, you know just 2 months ago, I was called in to do a case with a neurosurgeon, and he was taking out a brain tumor, and he took out a piece of the brain vault and he put a titanium plate, and I was called in to just shift the scalp around and close the defect. And so while he was operating, Gary, and you talk about life and it's all complexities and all that, and while he was teasing out the brain tumor, I leaned over his shoulder and I said, "Where's the mind?" And he looked back and me and he says, "What the hell are you talking about?" You see, and this is the funny thing about the medical field. It's all about evidence-based medicine. We want to see the brain, we want to see the heart, but when it comes to the mind and all these things, to us it's like a myth. It's all up there, nobody knows where it is, you can't pinpoint where it is. But I can tell you one thing that is very real. Now, the journey to expertise comes with a flavor, and that is failures. We can't run away from it. And so, even as doctors, no matter what we talk about, failures is part of life. And I thought we will start this discussion on what affects all of us, even not just the bread on the table, but how do we live our lives. And I love the way you talk about errors coming down and expertise going up. But for many of us in our own lives, there are more errors than expertise. And we learn the hard way through hard knocks. So I really love your article that you wrote about making the most of a failure. And I thought we should start from there because you said that embracing failures, be careful. If you embrace it too near and too close, you hug it, you might forget everything else in life. So, talk to us about failures. Take us there and some
All right.
personal experiences.
Too many personal experiences, unfortunately. There's a saying that, embrace failure or fail fast to learn faster.
Right,
And and it's to encourage people to not be afraid to fail. And I'm not comfortable with that because failure in many of the domains that I study, failure can be fatal for firefighters, for pilots, for physicians, nurses. Um, Failure just is tremendously risky and carries tremendous penalties. Now, for me personally, I don't engage in these kinds of life-threatening environments, but I still fail. Like if I put on workshops, and most of the workshops go very well, but
right.
not all.
Sure.
And when if I put on a workshop that doesn't go as well as I wanted, maybe it's not a complete failure, but it just didn't go well. I don't just push it aside and say, well, that's the way life is. It burns at me.
Yeah,
It really
absolutely.
bothers me that it didn't meet my standards. And for the next few days, I'm sort of walking around under a cloud, because, and I'm thinking, maybe I never want to do another workshop again. It's just too painful to do a mediocre job or a bad job. And then because the failure is burning at me, I'm thinking about it. And then eventually I realize here's what I could have done. Here's what I should have done. Here's the mistake I made. And I have that insight about how I could have made it much better. And when that happens, it's so exciting because then I can't wait to get another chance. I
Yeah.
can't wait for the next workshop. So I think the attitude I have towards failure is not to embrace it and feel good about it. I feel terrible about it. And the fact that it burns at me means that it's still whirling around in my mind
Mm,
until I can come up with a diagnosis of what I did wrong and what I could do better. So my model of failure is to be bothered by it, is to
yes.
be upset by it,
It
and
doesn't,
as a spur to generate insights.
absolutely, because it doesn't make us any smarter. And sometimes, the fear of failure can reduce, all the other positive sides to knowing what's the uprising risks and what's the downsizing risk. We go into this quandary because we are afraid that we will fail.
And that's a problem that afflicts many corporations. You know the diagram that I've talked
Yeah,
about improved performance. There's a down arrow, what you want to reduce, which is errors, and an up arrow, what you want to increase, which is insights and expertise. But most organizations don't really pay attention to the up arrow. They're
right.
all about the down arrow. They put in checklists, they have standard procedures, they have all kinds of techniques to try to minimize the chance of failure. But some of these techniques are so cumbersome and so oppressive that they squeeze out the possibility of insight. So the
Right.
organizations are getting in their own way by being so risk averse.
Yes, I mean this is human nature, isn't it? To overestimate risk and underestimate, opportunities,
Yeah,
and we always, get afraid to sort of dive in because we've
right,
had, remember that famous saying, "Once bitten, twice shy,"
right.
and it affects all of us in life. But Gary, from a personal point of view, I see and I hear so many people talking about transformation coaches and unlock your potential and all these things that are going on in the marketplace, that sometimes I wonder there's a kind of a zoo inside of each one of us because let the tiger come out, like the lion roar, and personally, even in my own working sphere as a plastic surgeon, I mean, failures can, like you say, it can burn you because we are trained for many years how not to do it. Because we can't afford to make a wrong incision because it can go on forever. But I want to take you from this mode of failures into this fascinating thing that you came up with called pre-mortem. Now,
Right.
in the medical field, we talk about post-mortem, and when unfortunately the patient is already dead, and we learn from all those mistakes. And the medical field and the medical faculty are the worst when it comes to talking about failures, because we try to cover up as much as possible. And I don't know whether you've heard of Matthew Syed, who is a British journalist, and he wrote the book Black Box Thinking. And he starts off with the logic of failure. And he quotes a medical a problem, a real tragedy, where the lady is 37 years old. Got a sinus problem. She's going in for a very simple operation. The anesthetist can't put a laryngeal mask in, and then he struggles. He can't put a tube in, and they're all fretting. And this lady is going downhill. And then the senior nurse has the mind to bring in the trolley that has the tracheostomy. But because of
Mhm.
seniority and all that, she just kept quiet because she didn't want to open her mouth.
Oh,
And that's it. And they lost, and the lady lost her life. So what I'm saying is that we need to be open when we come to failures and learn from them, isn't it? Because postmortem. So talk to us about pre-mortem, because I think that's an excellent thing. I was telling my surgeons about doing training, put a problem there and go fix it. You know what I mean? So how did that start? I mean, how did you come up with pre-mortem?
okay. This was in the late 1980s, and
Okay,
it was my first company called Klein Associates. And we would do a variety of projects. Most of our projects went very well, but not all of them. And when a project didn't do well, we would often have a postmortem, a review to see what went wrong. And that was helpful. We learned from that. But then I thought, why don't we do that kind of review at the beginning before the project starts? Maybe we can cut down the chance of a project failing. So we call that a pre-mortem before it happens. And it's become a very widely known method and in a variety of domains, including Wall Street. And the way the pre-mortem works is, I mean, we've all been in meetings where somebody, the group is getting ready to carry out a plan, and everybody talks about it. Everybody's on board. Everybody's ready. And then maybe the leader says, okay, does anybody see any problems?
right.
And nobody says a word. Maybe because they're afraid to, maybe because they don't want to disrupt the harmony, maybe because they really don't see any because they're just ready, they're ready to get started. So the pre-mortem exercise has the leader or a facilitator say, all right, now we're all excited about this plan. We're ready to get started with it. I'm looking into an infallible crystal ball,
Right.
and oh my gosh, it's 6 months, 12 months from now, and this project has been a disaster. It's been a fiasco. We know that this project has failed because the crystal ball never lies. Now, everybody around the table, we've got 2 minutes. You got a piece of paper in front of you. In 2 minutes, write down all the reasons why this project failed. And everybody starts writing like crazy. And then you go around the room and you capture what ideas they came up with and show it to them. And it's a very liberating exercise It allows people, it gives them permission, not only permission to come up with problems, there's a demand for them to come up with important weaknesses that hadn't been discussed before.
Right.
So it's like a total mindset shift that unleashes the power of their creativity and lets them use their experience base to suggest all kinds of issues that need to be taken into account.
Yeah.
And what it does, it it does a few things. One, it creates a culture of trust because now people have bounced ideas back and forth and have been candid about concerns. It allows people to see how smart their colleagues are because you'll say something, Charles, and I'll think, wow, I never thought about that.
Right.
And I'll appreciate the depth of your experience. And it allows the team to reduce their overconfidence because most teams are just wildly overconfident, thinking that their project is going to go perfectly.
Right.
Sometimes worry that we overdo it because the confidence goes down, and now everybody's excitement has been diminished a lot. So we then added a final step when we put all the problems on the whiteboard. Then we say, now everybody look at these issues, and I'm going to give you another 2 minutes. Write down all the things that you can do personally on this team to try to reduce the chance of some of these occurring. And then people are saying, well, I could do this, I could do that. And we wind up with a stronger plan and a stronger sense of resilience on the part of the team.
No, I think it's brilliant because in the Asian context, it's always follow the leader, and nobody says anything. You have a discussion, everybody's all mum and quiet, and there's no flow because nobody wants to put up their hand in case they say something that is that is out of the norm. But how long does this normally take? I mean, how long would the pre-mortem take? 20 minutes, half an hour?
Right. 20 to 30 minutes because we know people are busy and they've spent a lot of time discussing the plan and how it's going to run and who's going to do what and what the budget is and the milestones. And so they don't have a lot of time. So
Right.
this is really a 20 to 30-minute exercise.
Absolutely. And I think this is something I'm sure Elon Musk must be using this because you can't have you can't have people going up there with a problem. What happens if it doesn't? That kind of thing. No, I think it's brilliant. And I want to thank you for that because I use that a lot in our work. When you have a skin cancer comes up to me and you design it and then you ask, this is going to fail. It's failed. And then everybody
Mm.
comes up with their own kind of how to do it and kind of thing. And I think it's a brainer to bring it out. Yeah, so thank you for that. But
Sure.
the other part that I've heard so many of your YouTubes and a lot of it that you keep explaining how it all developed, naturalistic decision making and all that. But one word that caught me in your resume, in your history, way back 2008, is when you received an award called the Jack A. Kraft Innovation Award for Human Factors and Ergonomics.
Mm.
And I love the word ergonomics because that's how I launched MindFlow Ergonomics because we do breast augmentations, and the implant is designed ergonomically to work within a space in the chest wall. And so I think that's what. Now, did that kind of like spur up all your thinking about? Talk to us about ergonomics because nobody talks about it. But to me, it's the key to work proficiency and performance and the ergonomics of the mind. And I'll explain to you later what I'm doing. But did that sort of find its way into your work and your research?
I think it's very aligned with the work that we do. And it has to do with not just looking at equipment or devices or procedures, but thinking about what I call the cognitive dimension.
Right.
It's what exists, but who's going to use it? Who's going to operate it? How are they going to operate it? What might confuse them? Where might they make mistakes? How will they discover that they've made a mistake early enough so that they can correct it? How do they adapt? So for me, the ergonomic aspect is injecting the cognitive dimension
Right.
into the devices and the methods that we formulate.
Absolutely. I think this is the brilliance of, ergonomics because it's really the science of mental physics, I think. And
Yeah.
you're talking about work efficiency and, and how do we live it right. But, a lot of my colleagues have been asking when I said I'm talking to Dr. Gary Klein and naturalistic decision making. And I know it goes way back, but just give us a short intro, at least for people in this audience for how it started. I mean, what was the story behind this thing?
Right. So naturalistic decision making studies how people make decisions, make sense of situations, perform all kinds of complex tasks in natural settings as
Right.
opposed to artificial settings. For too long, our fields in psychology were limited by ways to do studies in a laboratory in a controlled situation where you control what the subject sees, and the subjects were usually college sophomores because those were readily accessible, and they were given tasks they had never seen before because if they were familiar tasks, some people might have more familiarity, some might have less, and so you'd have lots of variability in the data. And when it came time to do the statistical analysis, that variability would make it hard for the to come up to be able to find statistical significance. So they eliminated expertise, they eliminated experience by using novel tasks.
Right.
And this was extremely stifling. So, with naturalistic decision making, we look at people like firefighters and nurses and pilots and social workers, and we find that people in these professions have lots of experience. And this is one of the key ingredients that's missing from all the laboratory studies where you give people tasks they've never seen before.
Right.
So you miss how people build their expertise and use their expertise. So that's what naturalistic decision making is about. It studies these tasks in real settings. It studies them where the goals are not crystal clear and the goals may change as people perform the work. They work in organizations. They work with other teams. They may not have all the information they need, so there's lots of uncertainty. So you have all of these complicating factors that make it hard to study in a laboratory, but that's why the laboratory studies don't really generalize to
Sure.
the real world. And what we care about is how are people making these life and death decisions in the real world, in natural settings. That's what we're about. Now, I should say that we started this in the mid 1980s, and there is now a Naturalistic Decision-Making Association,
Oh,
and people can look it up online, naturalisticdecisionmaking.org, and it has 350 members around the world. We hold conferences every 2 years. We
right.
alternate between the United States and other parts of the world. The last one was this last July in New Zealand.
Right.
And one of the prime interests of ours in our association is expertise and how it develops and how it's used. And one of the things that worries us is what we see as a war on expertise. We see so many communities trying to belittle and denigrate expertise. We see artificial intelligence community saying, you don't have to. be smart to write a good report, turn it over to ChatGPT.
Right.
We see evidence-based medicine, which says, here's a set of best practices. Your job is to follow the best practices, even though you know, Charles, that the best practices don't readily apply to actual patients that may have several things going on
Yeah.
and different kinds of physiology.
Yeah.
But there's this notion of following best practices. So there's a heuristics and biases community claiming that people are biased. All these communities are attacking expertise, and expertise is so important, is so critical. And the naturalistic decision-making community is at the forefront of trying to preserve expertise and advocate for expertise. That's what's so exciting about working with my colleagues in that community.
No, I think it's as I said earlier on, the battle is the battle of the mind today,
Mhm.
and I'm very much a person actually that they are missing the heart in the whole manner because we live from the heart, you see, and not from the mind. And but I want to congratulate you because over the last 3 years, all that you're talking about in these last 30 years of your research and all that, how does it filter down to the man on the street? How do we what's the difference between making decisions and making choices? Is this a chicken and egg kind of thing?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily draw a line between the two. A decision. Well, no, let me back up on that. Too often we think about making decisions as choosing between options.
Right,
In our research, we find that people who have a reasonable amount of experience and expertise aren't saying, which option am I supposed to pick? They get into a situation, especially if there's time pressure, and they size up what's going on, and they immediately know what's a likely course of action to follow. So they're making decisions, but they're not wrestling with choices. So that's a critical distinction, Charles. And I'm
yes.
glad that you brought it up. So how can we help the man in the streets? Um, that's one of the things that my new company has been dedicated to is decision training for for a variety of domains, for petrochemical plant operators, for social workers, for firefighters. So if people really are looking to boost expertise in their area, um, you might get some useful tips by consulting on my company's website, www.shadowboxtraining.com.
Right.
So that's one suggestion. But
Absolutely. I think.
I have another suggestion. And before I go to the other one, and one of the techniques that we have, the reason the company is called Shadowbox, is that we have a Shadowbox method for boosting expertise and helping to train people. And it's not a method we even invented. It was one that was invented by a friend of mine, Neil Heinz, who's a firefighter,
Right.
and he worked for the New York Fire Department. And I heard about the method, and I said, "This is something that applies to a variety of areas, not just firefighting." So that's what we try to do with my company. So that's one suggestion to try to help your viewers if they want to improve their decision making or the decision making in their organization.
All
But I
right.
have another suggestion. I have just finished uh, a course called a Masterclass in Practical Decision Making.
Right.
And it's
Absolutely.
15 episodes. Each episode is only 5 minutes long. So you can watch one a day for 2 weeks and sweep through it all. And these are lessons, each lesson is designed to have one key takeaway that will help people that people can put into practice immediately.
Now I'm going to move from that, what you have done, which is fascinating and it's pretty applicable. For example, even here in the accident and emergency department, everybody is living in zones because you've got a green zone, yellow zone, red zone. And in an emergency situation, I mean, it's great to see the shadow of how experts do it. And this is really applicable even in our own medical field, that you have the experts to learn and how do you handle a situation. But I want to take you to something that is personally very exciting for me, and that is the recognition primed decision making model. Because I thought that was fascinating, and I've been trying to place it with what I've been doing for the last 2, 3 years. And so you came up with this, this whole system. And I'm very particularly interested in response and reaction mode, because all of life is lived in those two modes, you see. And so you got the subconscious mind mode, and which is, your good friend, your adversarial colleague, Daniel Kahneman, talks about the system one and the system two. But I was really going to ask you about this because it's so applicable to the daily man. I mean, my whole life was lived in a reaction mode. And so the amount of collateral damage that I've done in my own life, I wish I was your neighbor because I would have learned how to get out of that whole wretched, self-destructive mode, which you came up with. And I think it's brilliant because you talk about a situation, okay, like the Situation Room in the White House, and we all have challenges. And from that situation, and I've got the diagram here, you take it to sensory signals, all right? And from there, you cues, as you call it. And then because of the patterns of behavior over many years, many people are struggling in this, caught in this web. And you have given a brilliant answer, and I'm trying to add to it. And so you get these patterns. This pattern making thing is really brilliant because when you are in a reactive mode and someone triggers you, the pattern of your behaviors over the many, many years goes into reaction like automatically. It's instinctively. All right.
Right.
And then it goes into what you call the primed action script. Now, what I've came up with over the last 2, 3 years is that instead of going back to the Situation Room, you engage into system two, which is the mental simulation model.
Exactly.
And that is what I designed called MindFlow Ergonomics. It's a system of optimized, response system of 7 creative zones, which we can learn one a day and build it so that we have a response that is much more better of an outcome where, there's less collateral damage and it's safer. And I believe that that's the way to go, to live in that responsive mode. And I want your thoughts about that because that mental simulation model fitted beautifully into this whole recognition primed model that you talk about.
Right.
And I think you need both. You need one in the subconscious kind of system, and the other one the analytical part of it, which you talk about, and
Right.
which is the mental side, right? I mean, talk to me about that because I waited the whole day to hear this from you.
So this actually emerged from that study that I described at the beginning with firefighters.
Yeah.
Got a contract from the Army to study firefighters and to see how they made these tough decisions in ambiguous situations. So we started interviewing them, and I'll never forget the first firefighter I interviewed. I said, "I'm here to study how you make decisions."
Uh-huh.
Stop right there. I've been a firefighter 16 years. I've been a captain 12 years. And I don't think I've ever made a single decision.
Really?
And my heart sunk because we just got this contract to
Right.
study decision making in firefighters. He's telling me he never makes decisions. I said, "How do you know what to do?" And he said, "It's just procedures. You just follow the procedures." So I'm in panic right now because my project is just about to start and it's already crashing. It's already failing. So I said, "So it's just procedures. Can I see the procedure manual?" And he said, there's no manual. You just know.
All right.
So that was what changed my thinking and opened me up to what was really going on. And it created two mysteries. If he's not generating choices, if he knows what to do, how does how does that happen? How can it be so confident that his first impulse is going to be correct? And we found that's because he had been a firefighter for 16 years. He had created all these patterns, and he
Right.
could use patterns, which some people would call intuition, to immediately know what to do. He had an intuition about how to proceed, but intuition not in a spooky way, like it's something occult or something magical. Intuition based on his experience and his expertise. So it was an informed intuition that he was relying on. So that solved the first mystery. But there was still a second mystery. How do you evaluate an option,
Right.
comparing it to others to show which is better? And if he's only thinking of one option at a time, how does he evaluate it? And we had conducted a few dozen interviews, and we looked at our interview notes, and we realized that the way they evaluate it is by imagining it. And we call that mental simulation. They're saying, I think this is what I should do, but let me see if it'll work in this setting because I might be wrong. So they imagine carrying it out. And if they don't see any problems, then they're ready. If they see some weaknesses,
They go back.
then they can adapt it, they can improve it.
Right. Right. Right.
If they can't see any way to overcome real serious flaws, then they say, what other options, what other courses of action can I put into play? And so it's a blend of the intuition, the pattern matching to give you your initial intuition. And then the analytical part is the mental simulation that corresponds to system two to think it through consciously and deliberately. So this is not just using intuition, it's not just following your gut, it's a combination of intuition and analysis.
No, I think this is the gateway to breaking free for a lot of people who are trapped into this quagmire of just being in a reactive zone. Because when you talk about intuition, and when you tell somebody like me as a surgeon, you get this gut feeling. It's like when I had a podcast with a guy, Robin Hill, who is an emotional intelligence guru in the United Kingdom, and I told him I didn't know my emotions had any intelligence in them. You know what I mean? And so when someone says, I got a gut feeling, I said, hey, I never knew guts got feelings, man. But when you coined it now to intuition and putting it to expertise or coming to patterns, matching it, I think that makes sense, isn't it?
I think it makes tremendous sense. And we collected the data. The data were clear that this is the dominant strategy people use for making for handling tough decisions, and certainly for handling more straightforward decisions. And then other people have replicated it in other fields.
Right.
So this really stood the test of time.
Wonderful. I mean, this is why I'm so excited because having worked in this imaginary space and writing all these creative zones of how people can use it for a response to have better outcomes in life. And when I saw your model and mental simulation there, I said, gosh, this is made to fit. Because once you engage it into a response mode, it takes away all the damage from the reactive mode. And for me, it's all about systems. It's not goals. Our whole medical field is on systems. The body has got 11 systems in it. So if we continue to build that mental simulation system of 7 ergonomic zones, I mean, you can live from it and be much better people, better lives. I mean, This is exciting times, Gary.
It is. It
You
is.
know. So what's new? What's as we wind up now? What's the latest? What's exciting for you apart from your shadow box?
Okay, so the two things that I'm working on that are really getting me very excited. One is I'm working on insight. Now, I wrote a book about insight a decade ago, Seeing What Others Don't.
Right.
And I've gone back to it and tried to see if I can come up with additional methods, more powerful methods to help individuals come up with more insights. And I'm thinking more and more about organizations and helping organizations create a culture of insight. Because most organizations say that they want innovation and they want insights, but they really don't. They're all about the down arrow and trying to reduce mistakes. So
Correct.
I'm thinking about how organizations can reform themselves.
So
So
what's the
that's one.
difference? Difference between insights and intuition.
Right. So intuition is where we use our experience to know what's going on in a situation.
Right.
Insight is where we change our mental model and come up with novel, creative ideas about what is happening and how things work. So intuition is building on the past. Insight is breaking from the past and creating breakthroughs.
So it's really matching up with creativity.
Yes, very insight and creativity are obviously
Well,
closely aligned.
that's very good because at the end of the day, we all want to live the fulfilled life, and I think the more and more they study about the mind, the more and more they make it difficult. That it's like a maze, and so thanks to you and your work, we're going to see brighter days. I hope.
I hope. The other project I want to mention to you, Charles, is a set of tools that we're building called Artificial Intelligence Quotient, AIQ, to
Right.
help people because people are using artificial intelligence, Gen AI, LLMs, large language modules, Chat GPT, but these systems are not a replacement for human creativity
Of
and
course,
human.
of course.
So, but people don't know how these systems work, and they're intimidated by the system, and their own expertise is being diminished because they're just relying more and more on these systems. So we have techniques to help people uh, use these artificial intelligence tools as tools so that they're not controlled by the tool, so that they're more fully and firmly in charge rather than just tagging along.
No, I
So
think
we're
this is brilliant because there's such a fear of this AI coming in, and it can never match human intelligence. But at the same time, it's a tool like any other tool, like mindfulness. These are all tools that help us to see better, and I think we look forward to that. So, Gary, on that note, I must say that even though it's now closing 12 midnight for me here. I've got to go back with Chat GPT and have a good chat along the way back home. But listen, I want to just thank God for you. At this stage of your life, you're still digging in. The mind is just beyond comprehension. And we just thank you for all your work that you're doing. And we just hope that we live better lives. That's all. Better decisions.
And Charles, thank you for inviting me to have this conversation. As I expected, I really enjoyed the chance to interact with you. Thank you.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So, for those of you who have just joined us, this is MindFlow Ergonomics with the one man alone, Dr. Gary Klein. And again, please go into the linked notes that I've left for you. These are exciting times, Shadowbox. And I can tell you one thing, mirrors don't lie and shadows never leave you. And that's what the note that we all need to end as we live, try to live better lives with a better version of all ourselves. So once again, thank you for joining us on MindFlow Ergonomics.